I would now like to introduce our panelists, or first our moderator for this panel. Nik from 18 Ventures will be moderating this panel. And we have as panelists joining us Lisa from Stray Dog Capital and Prince Khaled from KBW Ventures and Andrew I from Big Idea Ventures. And last but not least, Mariliis Holm from Sustainable Food Ventures. And now I would like to hand it over to Nik.
Thank you, Anita. It's a real privilege to be here. Thanks for those intros. As Anita mentioned, I'll be acting as a moderator of this panel. It's truly an honor to share this virtual stage with Lisa, Andrew, Khaled, and Mariliis. Having the opportunity to shape the future of food as both a biologic and cultural centerpiece is an extraordinary privilege, and I really can't think of better stewards than the panelists we're going to hear from today. To kick things off, we'll start with a round of intros, and I'll start with myself to help set the stage. As mentioned, my name is Nik Talreja. I am on the team behind the scenes at CMS. I've been an organizer since day one, along with Alex and Anita and Cyrus and others. Among other responsibilities, I also serve as a general partner at a seed stage fund called 18 Ventures. At 18 Ventures, we're fairly generalist, and we invest in companies that support a healthier, more balanced world. And as such, the future of food is of great interest to us. I also serve on the board of a better for you food company called Maxine's Heavenly. It's based in Los Angeles. And through that role, I've really grown an appreciation for those who work in the food tech space. It's a tremendous amount of effort and really a dedication to bring products to market. So enough about me. I'll turn the mic over to our esteemed panelists here, and we'll start with a round of intros and then move on to a few discussion topics. So starting with Lisa, if that's okay with you, I'm going to ask each of you to share your background, but also tell us about your personal journey that led to your excitement about the future of food and your investments in the space.
Sure, thanks, Nik. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Feria. I'm the CEO of Stray Dog Capital. And we're early stage investors, and our focus is to take animals out of the supply chain and reinvent the food system. And we do so by investing in amazing products and services, both in the cultivated meat category, as well as the food technology, synthetic biology, and fermentation. We have over 35 investments, and we are incredibly active in the space. So I always see a lot of the panelists on this meeting and on this presentation. I see them a lot because we co-invest pretty frequently with each other. But it's been quite a journey to see how the plant-based and cultivated meat space has evolved in the past 5 years or so. And in terms of my personal journey, I actually came from the food space, General Mills, Procter & Gamble, among other companies. And through that journey, I saw this video called Meet Your Meat. And that was put together by PETA, still out there if you want to take a look at it. And I was really thrown back and really was surprised that our food system worked in that way. And in what I thought would be a time where all that would have been made differently, more efficiently, and with less pollution, and obviously with no animal suffering. And so that really changed the path of my life in terms of what I wanted to do with my time, treasure, and talents. And I really have been, and along with the Stray Dog Capital team, really have been focusing on how do we improve and upscale the entire food system so it's more sustainable, it's fairer, and it can really take us as a species to survive for many, many, many more generations.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you for that. Khaled, would you like to go next?
I think the number one saying for 2020 is, hey, you're muted. But anyway, sorry about that, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me on this. I'm really honored to be among such esteemed panelists. I'm a drop in the ocean compared to what you guys are doing. So I learned a lot from you. So thank you, everyone. Well, my name is Khaled Alwaleed. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I started KBW Ventures primarily to invest in early stage startups. It really morphed into this quote unquote purpose-driven vehicle when I started learning about cellular agriculture and plant-based proteins. And my first meetings, I remember them like yesterday, were with Dr. Uma, and with Ethan Brown in LA. And Uma actually was in New York then, and I think this was like 5 years ago. And from the moment I heard their pitch, it was so clear to me that the future of protein is definitely in their hands, and in the hands of companies like them. So it just made a lot of sense for me to do a lot of homework and really decide on what I wanted to focus my capital and focus my time on. So I decided to really narrow it down and focus on the biotech industry, cellular agriculture, obviously, and being the top of them, and obviously technology in general. We don't necessarily invest specifically in purpose-driven companies, but we call them, we love to have a double bottom line. So if a company does have, if a company is purpose-driven and will generate good growth in the next, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years onwards, then this is a company that we definitely want to back. And I've been so blessed to meet so many amazing people along this road. So and me being here is just a proof of that.
Thank you, Khaled, and thanks for being here. Andrew, would you like to intro yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Andrew I from Big Idea Ventures. So our remit is focusing on solving the world's biggest challenges by supporting the world's best entrepreneurs. We firmly believe that a lot of the challenges we have, whether it's climate, animal welfare, personal health, and so on, are in the hands of entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, not at all in the hands of politicians, policymakers, and others who are more entertainment than anything else. So we're out there trying to find great young not in age, but in terms of stage of company, early stage companies who need support, money, guidance, helping them to move their businesses forward. And we're trying to build, and every day we're working on building an ecosystem globally, but in kind of key hubs, so that we can help those companies bring great products to market. It's our belief that, we want to get the 95, 96% of the population who are every day making micro decisions in favor of animal protein, and give them better tasting, better texture, better priced alternatives to that animal protein, so that these daily decisions they're making will actually be more sustainable for the planet, and more beneficial for animals and so on. So that's our current fund, New Protein Fund. We have an office in New York and Singapore focused on the North America and Asia market. Saying that, we invest globally. Next year, we'll have a presence in both Europe, out of France, and also in India. So our steps to work across many markets is in progress. So that's Big Idea Ventures. In terms of my journey to kind of get here, I started my career at Procter & Gamble, but when I went to business school in the US, started a company in my dorm room. And I've spent the last 15 to 20 years in that sort of entrepreneurial journey. And somewhere along the line, somebody was crazy enough to give me some money to help other entrepreneurs in their journey, and to hold their hands and work with them as part of their kind of advisory team. And that eventually evolved to the point where, we've got a team of people and we've got funds from large investors, and our goal is to find those other entrepreneurs, to work with them and support them. And now we're a fund focused on doing so. So that's kind of the journey I've been through. Why specifically alternative protein, cell-based, plant-based? Because I think that's probably the most important category in the food sector, bar none, in terms of delivering on what needs to happen in the next 8 to 10 years from a climate change, animal welfare, personal health perspective. There is literally no other more important sector, and there is no more important sector in terms of the impact that we can have by working with entrepreneurs and giving them the support they need to be successful.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew, and congrats on some great demo days this week. It was really fun to see some awesome companies go through that.
I wish I could claim that. I was going to say I wish I could claim that I had anything to do with it. I just turned up and my team delivered on that.
Well, it was awesome. Mariliis, best for last.
Hi everyone, really great to be here. My name is Mariliis Holm and I'm the co-founder and partner of Sustainable Food Ventures. We just launched 3 weeks ago together with my partner Ryan Bethencourt, a venture fund focusing on the future of foods that is plant-based, cell-based and recombinant. I'm excited to be back at CMS. I was here last year on the seafood panel representing Finless Foods as their former head of food science. So I'm just recently, very recently transitioning from the startup world now into the investing world, and it's been very exciting. In my personal journey, I've been in the food industry for the last 10 years. I'm food scientist by background and training. I've worked in big corporations as well as started my own company that went through FoodX, the former food accelerator that Andrew was leading in New York. And also, I discovered the alternative protein space for myself back in 2015. And it happened during my master's thesis about plant-based proteins. And I had a very interesting insight, which as a food scientist, I thought I already knew. So since little, I've been very cautious about the way I use water. So, when I brush my teeth, I close the tap to save the water because I know fresh water is one of the things we're going to lack, hopefully not in the future, but at the time, 20 years ago, it was the talk and it still is. And when I learned during my independent study that 1 burger is equal to 2 months of showering, I was like, oh my God, I'm just gonna eat less of those burgers and do a bit of a longer shower. So I was like, I found my little first spark to just kind of like go deeper into the space. And then when I did all this personal research that I had never heard in the traditional food industry, the way I was taught in universities around the whole globe, I was like, wow. I mean, I went 360 or 180. 360 is going back to where I was. I went 180 to this world, and it's been magnificent ever since. So excited to be here and excited for this space to boom even more.
For sure, thanks for being here. And I think we all really believe this space will continue to balloon. And I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg, I think. To kick things off is for next steps here, I presented a few discussion topics that I think we can all touch on. And I would hope that this is more of a roundtable discussion. So while I may start with one of you, please feel free to chime in and add to the conversation. The first topic that I have here is about where you've invested historically and where you're excited to invest next. And I think here, there are of course a lot of sort of questions and concerns about sustainability and realizing some value here at the commercialization stage of some of these investments. So I think having a tilt towards speaking about where you're excited to invest next as far as taking some of these earlier stage notions and concepts to scale would be really exciting to hear about. But I'll leave it up to you to kind of touch on that topic. So maybe starting off with Andrew, if you can speak about where you've invested within the cultivated meat value chain and where you're excited to invest next, that would be amazing.
Super. Yeah, so we've made 7 investments at this point in cell-based in particular. We've invested in a company called Biftech that's focused on a plant-based growth factor, so an equivalent to fetal bovine serum, but plant-based versus, centrifuged heart blood of a calf, etc. So, we're working on moving towards a plant-based growth factor. Part of the reason why that's important is because the fetal bovine serum is both particularly unpleasant in terms of how it's sourced, but also in terms of the cost of manufacturing. And that's been a key barrier to kind of the cell-based industry kind of exploding. We think, if we can get to a plant-based version that's actually 1/50th of the cost producing that growth factor with the similar efficacy, then that just kind of totally changes the game. So that's one investment we've made. And there's other companies as well as BIFTech looking at that kind of growth factor aspect. We've got various companies tackling the scaffolding question. There's a company called Novel Farms, for example, that's using a natural ingredient to create that scaffolding. We've seen probably 5 to 10 companies looking at different iterations of scaffolding to solve that part of the equation. We've got a company called Orbillion that's looking at cell lines, and so on. So we've got multiple companies that we've made the investment in across the cell-based space. So I could go on forever, but no one wants to hear me anymore. So that's probably a good summary of where we're at so far.
Thanks, Andrew. And you highlighted, one aspect, which is of course the serum. And I think, production of serum to sustain growth of, in this medium, I think is an area of great focus. Plant-based options are probably a really great end goal. Do you think there are intermediate sort of ways to think about kind of scaling up serum that could be viable?
So is the question, are there ways to scale up the serum? I'm not sure I fully understood the question correctly. I apologize. Oh,
no, my apologies if it wasn't clear. I connected with a company a little while ago that's considering alternative sort of, use cases for serum or sources for serum, including, for example, insects. I guess if you've looked at other companies in the space, since I know there's great focus there, are there ones you think are also pretty interesting to consider?
Yeah, so we've made the investment in BIFTech. We haven't had a reach out from a company yet, aside from those guys who want investment. So, in other words, we haven't looked at other companies from a deep due diligence perspective to consider, how which other companies are good in this space. I'm aware that there are 2 or 3 companies in the growth factor space, but I haven't really spent a lot of time digging deeply into them yet. I haven't been given that opportunity. I don't know if Lisa or Prince Khaled or Mariliis have had that opportunity.
So our approach has actually been a teeny bit different. We really have focused on companies in the supply chain that really are doing basically the soup to nuts, i.e. they're doing the science, they're doing their own growth factors, they're doing all that stuff. What I'm most excited about is now some of those companies, including Memphis Meats and Super Meat and Mosa Meats, they're starting to pave the path towards scale up. And that's when I think the enabling technology companies are really going to have a major role to play. What we noticed a couple of years ago, even as recent as a year ago, is that the science wasn't developed to a point where the enabling technologies could really help the companies because they were still testing so many different scenarios and directions. But now I feel like that the enabling technologies are starting to really aid in getting the cost down of these products and really aid in the scale up portion. And I'm really excited to see them fully unleash because that's where we're going to get the economies of scale that we need these products to have. So when I think about what I'm most excited about is not only these companies, the first of these companies starting to scale, like not only in the pilot plant, but actually in commercial scale. And we're starting to see some evidence of that, including some of the large races, for example, for Memphis recently. And also how do these technologies can continue to aid the main companies in helping them do that faster, better, so we can get these products in the consumers' plates.
Awesome, thank you, Lisa. Mariliis or Khaled, would you like to comment on that as well?
Sure, I have a more general comment as I'm very new to the investment space. However, just before launching Sustainable Food Ventures, me and Ryan did an angel investment to the first African clean meat company called Mzansi Meat. And that was my first investment personally, but Ryan has been an industry pioneer for the last 6-7 years already, being the first investor in Memphis Meats, Stimulus Foods, Clara Foods, Jelter, it goes on and on, together with the Indie Bio team. And since starting Wild Earth, his current company, he also made he was the first investor in Shioak Meats that just recently raised their Series A. So I have a great partner to learn and evolve together with. And what we are excited about, and what I am personally excited about, is to invest outside of the valley.
Yes, that's such a good point, Wallah. We've actually been recently looking into other companies just outside of the valley, especially in the cultured meat industry. Not because we think it's oversaturated in Silicon Valley, but it's because the market is going to be so accommodating for so many businesses in cultured meat, and we've seen this explode. I mean, look how many plant-based protein companies there were and how many there are now. Look how many cellular agriculture the companies there were and look how many they are now. It's absolutely enormous when it comes to cellular agriculture. So the just because we invest in another company doesn't mean we don't trust into the companies we already invested in, but we think that the market is big enough definitely to accommodate that. And more importantly, the scale of these companies that can grow is absolutely enormous. I mean, the meat industry is if I'm not mistaken, I've seen so many different conflicting numbers, but what a $2 trillion market. That's only going to go up, by the way. And that's the sad reality. We don't have the resources on this earth to sustain a larger market cap for farming animals. So I'm really proud of the work that all these amazing companies are doing. And in my point of view, we're only scratching the surface. I mean, I'm thinking in the next 3 to 5 years. And in my opinion, honestly, 3 years, I think we're going to see cellular agriculture on people's plates in retail stores. And a lot of companies and a lot of big companies are going to shy away from saying that publicly, but I really do believe that. As a matter of fact, if you want me to be honest, I actually do feel in a selective restaurants, we will see cellular agriculture in the end of 2021.
Yeah, that would be a tremendous accomplishment, I think, for the industry for sure, if we can get to that stage. And initially it may start out as a luxury product if the price is not yet at scale, but I think that is sort of like a foray into getting to everyone's plate. Kind of following the impossible route, right, if you will. I think makes a ton of sense for this. So well said.
I would potentially see it slightly differently. I think Asia will approve cell-based meat within the next 3 to 6 months, and Asia will become, in my opinion, a pretty strong driver towards the marketplace and the technology kind of evolution of cell-based, to the point where it's not even a kind of an impossible in rare occurrences, but it actually becomes quite a pervasive source of protein over the next 2 to 3 years. I think Asia is going to really drive the engine for this.
Yeah, that would be super interesting, Andrew. That actually leads into the next discussion topic I had for us, which is really about the global impact of this industry. And that topic in sum is about how we all see this industry playing out across multiple geographic markets, and including ones where food shortages are still evident, right? Because I think in some markets, meat is just a really cheap option still. And if we're trying to replace how meat's consumed and not really alter someone's diet or alter their cultural habits, how and when does that happen? Mariliis, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So as I said earlier, Sustainable Food Ventures is really excited to invest outside of the valley in all the underserved markets there that are out there. And we really want to invest in founders and companies who have the potential of becoming the next regional leaders. And I feel like the companies that do it in their home countries, in their home regions, really have the advantage of knowing their food culture in and out, because it's something you're born into, you grow up with. It goes for, I mean, in America, maybe not centuries, but in other parts of the world, oftentimes for long periods of time. And food is usually something so cultural and so personal that we change it the last. Even if we move from one country to another, that's the last thing that we change. So being a company and a founder that does something very traditional, for example, like Mzansi meats in Africa, starting with springbok, it's really, really interesting because they can then not only serve their home region, but also the communities that have moved from their home country abroad, so that they can serve also the communities globally and then people who then, are introduced to these new cuisines and type of meats and then seafood around the world. So I have really high hopes for for us and the companies that are going to be collaborating with us in this space.
Would anyone else like to comment on that generally?
The only thing I would add to that is that we have had a lot of different organizations reach out to us in other parts of the world, especially if their country relies a lot of imports because of just general food safety, food security. I mean, I think the pandemic is a great example of what happens when supply chains are interrupted. And I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and we heavily rely on imports. So, you know, a place for cell-based meats is to help countries not only make sure that they're self-reliant in any situations, including the worst, like the current one, but also that they can continue to expand their own supply chains and secure those for the safety of the people that live there. And so I think cell-based has such a huge, huge part in the future of that, because it's a combination, Mariliis, I think, said it really nicely, between how do you serve the local community in a way that it's just brainless. Like, people don't have to think about it. It's such an obvious choice because it's tasty, because it costs the same or less, because it doesn't have the environmental impact, and you can make it the way that you normally made it. And then governments and policy makers can also know that they're protecting their people in terms of supply chain disruptions.
I mean, I love that you just mentioned that, because literally everyone, all 216 people, and hopefully a lot more in the next days and months coming ahead, they're going to know exactly what we're talking about when we say there was an issue with food shortages and this pandemic isn't really a bad pandemic. I mean, this is just a walk in the park compared to what's coming, what could be coming next if we keep treating animals the way we are through the wet markets, or even the other type of wet market, which is factory farming. The one thing that we need to keep our eyes on is that the production have to be manageable for these cellular agriculture and plant-based protein companies. And as soon as these costs are manageable to the extent that they can get them low enough, it's a game changer. I mean, we're looking at countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries, many countries around the world, their food imports is what, 80%, 90%, and that's on a good day. And that's a scary statistic, if you want me to be honest. And obviously, there are other things that other foods that you can source through through hydroponics and whatnot. But regardless of that, people are still going to want to eat their meat, and the way that you produce animals now is highly inefficient. And we've just said it, we've seen it on Memphis Meat's website. You know, they can get it from a cell to a full-fledged piece of meat in 4 to 6 weeks. Now that solves one part of food security, but then we have to look at bigger issues rather than just people going hungry, and that's the environmental issues that we're doing. That's the health issues that we're going through with sustaining the way that we're eating. So a lot of changes has to happen in the next 30, 40 years. I don't think we even have that long a time to actually wait. We have a lot shorter time. So these companies are leading the way in this, and there is no argument from my point of view is that the future of meat is cellular agriculture and plant-based alternatives, plant-based proteins, sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Khaled. You know, another aspect to this that I think, Andrew, you touched on is, you know, where will we see broad-based regulatory approval that can actually enable the next chapter of development here? And I actually think that, you know, a more proactive sort of national interest here on food security could actually lead to advancing this industry for different local markets. I don't know if you have a comment on that, Andrew, specifically, but you know, I think if we think of this as a global industry, of course, catering to global interests and global tastes specifically, you know, how can we as investors sort of promote that globalization of production so it's not centralized in the more advanced countries like the US and perhaps even China to a certain degree, but actually support, you know, food security across the world here?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things is that, and this comes back to one of the things Prince Khaled was saying, is that a lot of these regions have 95, 96%. So Singapore, 95% of its food is imported. Key, areas of the UAE, it's a similar percentage, 95, 96% of the food is imported across all of the categories. So if their partners or if their neighbors stop sending them food, they basically starve. It's a really challenging, from a food security perspective, it's a challenging situation. And that's the same whether if they're eating regular food or if they're eating plant-based meat, seafood, dairy, because those plant-based products still require inputs. And if the inputs aren't being shipped, i.e. the soy, the wheat, the pea protein, etc., then plant-based isn't the solution either. The only true solution is either traditional farming or cell-based. And there are reasons why traditional farming isn't really the way to go in Singapore and UAE, for example. I also don't buy into the whole kind of vertical farming thing, because the only thing I've really seen coming out of that is leafy greens, and that doesn't provide a population with enough food and diversity of food for the long term. So cell-based is, in my mind, the only way forward. I think we're going to get that approved within Singapore within the next 6 months. I think that's a safe assumption. I'm actually being told by different parts of, well, okay, I'm not going to go there, but I'm actually being told that it's actually sooner than 6 months. So I'm saying 6 months so I can look smart when it happens before then. China, I think I've been hearing they're pushing it forward as well. So, I think the US, in terms of approvals, regulatory approvals for cell-based, is probably going to be 5 years or more. And that's political more than anything else, because of the power blocks of the ranchers, the farmers, and so on, having control over their senators. And I think it's become more of a political issue than a science-based issue. So I think the regulatory environment is going to be patchy globally, and I think it's going to be driven by those countries who are challenged from a food security perspective. I also think consumers have a role to play in this as well, by the way, because I saw people's opinions shifting with COVID, where they started to look at the traditional animal protein supply chain and start pushing back on whether it was the right way to is the right way to go in the future. I think consumers actually may turn around in the next 3 to 5 years and be pushing towards a cell-based way forward, because it'll be seen as a cleaner way to produce protein with less likelihood of pathogens. Obviously, the water inputs, the land inputs, the antibiotics are no longer required. So I think we're actually going to see the smart consumers pushing towards cell-based as well over the next 3 to 5 years, even if the regulatory environment doesn't back it up.
Yeah, if I can chime in, I love what you just said there, Andrew. And from my experience, I know you know a lot about Singapore and possibly China, but from my point of view, just look at our next door neighbors. I mean, we're working closely with the UAE government. They about seven, maybe a year ago right now, they announced the first minister for food security, state minister for food security, Her Excellency Mariam Al-Mehri. An absolute gem, brilliant lady. She knows exactly how to tackle this issue, and we've had numerous discussions with her, and we're advancing talks on a regular basis. These countries really do see the issues and on hand before COVID, and right now with COVID, they're accelerating that. And I would urge the UAE to become one of the contenders to allow or to regulate rather cellular agriculture, so that it can be widespread here in the region. Because at the end of the day, not everyone knows, but many people might know that the region here is very meat centric. So if anything is needed, cellular agriculture is, and I applaud the UAE's government for their vision of appointing such a visionary and such a leader like Her Excellency Mariam Al-Mehri.
Thanks for that, Khaled. In the interest of time here, I'll probably switch gears to a different discussion topic that I think this is inherently related to, which is the notions of nutrition and sustainability that really factor into this entire ecosystem and industry that we're investing in. When you all make investments, how much do you factor in those notions of nutrition specifically and sustainability as well in each of these investments you make? Knowing, of course, that we're not at scale yet, but the thesis is that at scale, this does make sense. So how do you really reckon with that, and how do you kind of compute that this does make sense today? And I guess I'll start with you, Khaled, since I think you touched on some of these issues already. So maybe you touched on them a bit more, and you can hand it off to someone else.
So from my point of view, I don't think anyone from us can argue that meat isn't good for you. The reason we're investing in cellular agriculture isn't because it's good for you. The reason we're investing so heavily and we're backing this technology is because we understand that there's a problem and this solves the problem. Now, should people be eating cellular agriculture on a daily basis like they are now? Meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks in between? No. It's as simple as that. But at the end of the day, the thesis that we look into is there a good economic return, and is there a social impact in it? And if it hits both scenarios, and I'm really happy with it. I mean, like Blue Nalo, we've got an amazing team of experts who have really a really good backing with innovation, their technology for commercialization, cell biology, tissue engineering, intellectual property. You've got an array of experts in this company that's driving to do one thing: solve a huge issue that we have with the way that we're farming fish. Blue Nalo is just one of the amazing companies that I was so happy to back, and I'd back them again and again, just because we understand that there is a solution that they offer, and it's a viable one, and it's a needed one.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is that initially we are really looking to relieve the environmental footprint of meat, right? At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're eating products that don't have the negative externalities that meat does right now. But to Khaled's point, the nutritional component will be very similar, if not identical. However, I think the benefit of something like cultivated or cell-based meat is that in the future, you really can customize that to make it actually more nutritious than meat could ever be on its own. That's nothing that we're looking at in step one, but ideally, step 2 or 3 would be a future where you still can have your delicious meat, but it actually doesn't have cholesterol or has omegas or has other benefits that help enhance nutrition. But from day one, the overall environmental footprint would and should be less.
Yeah, that Mariliis, I also saw you nodding during Khaled's response, as well as Lisa. I don't know if you have anything else to add here.
No, just wanted to echo Lisa that while working at Finless Foods, like something that, as Lisa said, step number 2 would be to really personalize a piece of meat for the customer in terms of like how much, well, we're talking about bluefin tuna here, how much omega-3s do we have, and how, yeah, all the other nutrients that are there that are maybe dependent on the person's age or that the person's where their health is, the health conditions. So really merging those two, health and nutrition, in the future, and do it in a personalized format is a future to wait for.
Thanks, Mariliis. And actually leads. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Looks like you want to add something here.
The only kind of really quick point I was going to make was we mentioned, Mariliis mentioned, I keep getting you're pronouncing your name wrong, I apologize. Africa, for example, traditionally they've not had as far as I'm aware, they've not had a kind of an animal agricultural process in quite the same way, or the factory farming approach in quite the same way that we have in North America and Europe and other places. And cell-based may be a way of actually skipping that whole damaging from a sustainability perspective factory farming approach and kind of skip it like they've managed to do in their telco system and so on. India has traditionally been a continent which has been predominantly vegetarian. And are now increasingly, because of aspirations to kind of wealth and meat consumption and so on, are moving aggressively towards more and more meat consumption. I would love to, if somehow we can align what's happening on the cell-based side with their desire to consume more meat and skip that whole animal factory farming damaging environmental process for India as well. Because if you think about, if the impact on our climate of North America, Europe, and so on, and the factory farming is just deadly and dramatic, just think what happens if we get 2 new continents that haven't been using that factory farming approach. If they move to it, thinking that they're moving in the right direction, maybe we can help them to get what they want from a consumption perspective, but skip that kind of deadly is a very dramatic word, but skip that unsustainable approach of animal factory farming. So I'd love if we could somehow help India in particular and Africa to kind of get where they want to go from a consumption perspective, but skip that kind of factory farming process in the middle of their kind of protein evolution.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And I think, in India specifically, while it may not be the largest consumer of meat, I think dairy is a huge, they consume quite a bit of dairy. And Khaled, I know you invested in Turtle Tree Labs, and I'm pretty excited about the future of dairy and where we can think about, creating better avenues for creating dairy protein. So it looks like you may want to add something there.
Actually, I do. So literally about 4 hours ago, Turtle Tree just won the Entrepreneurship World Cup with Miss Global Forum. There was a big conflict there because I was one of the finalist judges. So I did tell everyone that I am an investor in Turtle Tree. But honestly, the number of companies that were amazing, and each one of them could have won. But Turtle Tree is an amazing company that's doing that's making serious changes, especially when it comes to specifically, when it comes to cellular agriculture for sourcing milk and dairy products. So this is just a perfect example of where the world is investing in. A company that's cellular agriculture, specifically in the dairy industry, or targeting the dairy industry, just won a competition out of 100. I think about more than 2,000 or 3,000. No, I'm sorry. I think about 100,000 competitors there were. It was a huge number of competitors. So there you go, and it just shows you where the world is heading, and then shows you even to investors who aren't really impact driven, but they do see the value in investing in these type of companies, because this is the future.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads to our next topic, which is about notable trends that we're seeing in the industry from an investor perspective, including perhaps consolidation of capital in certain areas where we've seen wins or huge up rounds, valuation trends perhaps at the earlier stages that could be a meaningful guide to some of those who are tuned in today, and of course commercialization potential as well. Lisa, would you like to comment on some of this?
Yeah, I think initially, so in the beginning of this year, what I saw after Beyond Meat's IPO is that there was so much enthusiasm for the area, particularly anything beef, burger, protein related. And there were a lot of investors, individuals, families, and then larger venture capital firms that decided to add some of their other bucket into this area. Once COVID hit, some of that dried up. And so the ones left standing were the ones that were still investing before and will continue investing after. Luckily, I think we've been able to hold valuations that are pretty at a pretty neutral place. So valuations haven't really crashed down, even though investors and some investors have taken a back seat until they see where this COVID thing is going to go and when it's going to lift. But we have continued supporting companies. I know a lot of our collaborators and syndicated partners have continued to invest in companies. So there's still a lot of enthusiasm for this space. I see a lot of companies that have successfully raised. As a matter of fact, none of the companies in our portfolio that have come back for capital have gone empty-handed. All of them have been able to get their raises. So there is enthusiasm, belief, and a lot of confidence from the side of the investors to the cell-based space. Now there's a little bit of a catch-22 there, because the number of startups that have joined the space have continued to go up significantly. And I think some of that has to do with startups are starting their own, the first cell-based company in Australia or New Zealand, or, you pick a country. And so we've looked at over 60 companies. And so there's been a lot of deal flow, also a lot of new companies that we've started to look at that are doing cell-based in different parts of the world, which we're particularly excited about, because that means that there is a lot of entrepreneurial power that is going, instead of going to sell more widgets over here, they're actually putting their talents to bear as it relates to replacing the current food system. And in terms of commercialization, the companies that have come back to the investors for capital have continued their plans. A lot of them have had to pivot significantly into making sure that if their reliance was on food service partnerships to begin with, or they wanted to do a JV with a food service partner as a way to manufacture their process, they have had to pivot a little bit. I don't think that for the cell-based market, that's at the end of the day going to make a difference, because they're still in the development process, and the partners that are going to want to receive these products are still there, and they're still doing well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lisa. I think it would be good for us to also take a look at some of the attendees' questions here. And one question that came in from Doug Grant actually touches on something we just talked about, Lisa, which is on sort of the commercial potential, exit potential, and how we're kind of allocating capital. Doug's question is, for anyone on the panel, how do you think about exits when evaluating cultivated meat companies? Do you think there will be more acquisitions or IPOs compared to software or other segments of tech VC investing? Lisa, if you'd like to take that, or whoever else wants to jump in, feel free.
Sure. Most of our companies are really targeting some kind of partnership with either an existing company or partners that can get these products to market in a way that is not their expertise. So a lot of our companies that have handled cell-based are really masters of science. I mean, they just do that part incredibly well. Are they manufacturing experts, or do they want to necessarily go and develop a whole manufacturing partnership? Very few. The majority of them are starting to look for strategic partnerships that can say, okay, I take this product up to here. Mariliis is an expert on manufacturing, has a great big old company in Europe that can then, put this out on that side, is going to take it from there and actually get it to the consumer. So we're looking for a lot. What we've seen is a lot of this will very likely be acquisitions, where there's a larger company and they tuck in these companies into their existing supply chain. So similar to what a General Mills would do for a plant-based company, where they're like, okay, you have distribution on Whole Foods and Sprouts and Kroger, we're going to plug you into our supply chain, and now you're going to have distribution in Walmart, Costco, grocery, convenience stores, et cetera. In a similar way. In general, IPOs tend to be the smallest amount of companies actually IPO. Exits are typically in acquisitions and strategic partnerships.
So I would build on that very quickly. There was an announcement, I think today, from MeatTech3D that they've invested in and are moving forward with an acquisition of Piece of Meat, a company out of Belgium that is focused on cell-based fat and related. I'm not sure if that's the first acquisition in the cell-based space. I actually haven't had a look around to find out if there were others prior to this, but I know it's an example from our portfolio of a company that actually is in the process of going through that acquisition stage. So yes, there is a company being acquired at this moment with an Israeli publicly listed company called MeatTech3D. Secondly, one of our LPs is Tyson Foods out of the US. I think they're the second or the third largest animal protein company globally. I know that they see plant-based as an opportunity for evolution of their business model. They consider themselves in the protein business, not just in the animal protein business. They want to bring protein to consumers, in whatever form that is, plant-based or animal protein in the more traditional sense. I haven't actually spoken to them about cell-based, but I can't imagine that if they're in the protein business, they won't keep a careful eye on companies that are in this space, whether it's from an acquisition or from a partnership perspective. Again, as they're a US-based company, I would imagine that the regulatory environment will be an important factor in how they evolve with the industry on the cell-based side.
Thanks, Andrew. There are a lot of really great questions here from the attendees, so hopefully we can get to some of these in Slack after the session. But one question that caught my eye was from Janesh Shah from Counterfactual Ventures, and he stated here that the number of cell ag startups has been doubling annually between 2015 and 2020, and he asks us, how do we see this competitive landscape evolving? More specifically, how do we compare and contrast this with the broader startup world where 75 to 90% of startups fail? And how does this inform our investment strategy? Khaled, if you'd like to take that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were off mute because you wanted to answer. So Janesh, he basically is talking about how many companies in the broader startup ecosystem fail. 75 to 90% of companies just fail before they get to the next stage. How does that factor into how we invest in this ecosystem?
Oh, that's a great question. So honestly, from my point of view, that's just the nature of the game. That's just venture. I mean, there's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the companies that many venture capital companies invest in are going to be wiped out, and 20% is going to return the majority and even more of the fund. So it's just the nature of the beast. However, from our standpoint, you just have to be a little more selective and a little more later stage, and it makes it a little safer. I mean, from our point of view, also we have a fund called Proof, which is a pro rata opportunity fund, and we partner up with the early stage smaller funds, 20 million to $100 million funds, and then we fulfill their pro rata rights through an SPV with the companies that they want to keep investing. So that really reverses the 80-20 rule to practically no write-offs. Well, we had one for now, which is if you remember Lily Robotics, but anyway, that's another subject. But it's just the nature of the beast. People just need to understand that venture is a risky business, and entrepreneurship. I mean, the number one thing that I would describe entrepreneurs describe, but the number one word I would think of if I think of an entrepreneur is perseverance. You just have to just keep going and learning from your mistakes. And if one fails, you'll make it into the next one. If not, you'll make it into the next one. But don't be discouraged at all.
Well said, Khaled. Look, there's some really good questions here, but I also want to give us sorry, Andrew, go for it.
Sorry, really quickly. One of the things I see in this space is that companies get backed by IndieBio and other companies who are very focused on proving the science. And I think to some degree, and obviously there's a lot of science involved in what's happening in the clean space, but I think we're past that. We're past, running around having kind of science experiments and proving that we can do it. I think we know we can do it. Now it's about commercialization. It's about figuring out how to take that kind of proof point technology and creating a business and a sustainable business around it. So I almost I'm not going to get it, but I almost want people to stop funding science experiments and start funding the growth of the science experiments that have already proven themselves, and actually move those teams towards a feasible, sustainable, growing business that is able to deliver this product at scale. And I think that's the kind of chasm that needs to be crossed in the cell-based space. We've got a lot of people running around in their white coats, super excited about the fact they can do something. Well, that's great, but where do we go from there? And I think that's what's next. And I think one company that's doing it, or at least starting to think about it in the right way, is Shock Me out of Singapore. who are doing crustacea, so shrimp, crab, lobster. But from my point of view, it's less now about funding white coats being excited and more about how do we take that initial proof point and that proof of concept and turn it into a real sustainable business that will deliver a product at scale and a price that's competitive.
Such a good point. I mean, all revolves around where you get your deals sourced. I mean, you get them from the back of a napkin left somewhere in a restaurant. That's not a good place, So definitely look into where you invest your money. That's such a good point. I mean, Big Idea Ventures is definitely an accelerator. I would urge people to look into very, very seriously. IndieBio, such an amazing entity. So companies like that, you have to Y Combinator. You just have to go behind these types of companies.
I'm going to pile on this one too, because I think that there are some very good points that both Khaled and Andrew made regarding, I love the idea of the white coats. So here, when we started looking at these companies, 5-6 years ago, we would see a company at block 0, basically Uma and Nik, literally starting out. Here's what we want to go do. We don't know how we're going to do it, but here's kind of the plan, and we're going to go and follow that and figure it out as we go. And we're like, okay, good, go do that, and we started funding them. Well, once you get to company 45 and they're also wanting to, go do the almost exact same thing. Obviously, it's really hard to know because there's not transparency among companies. You don't know what this company is doing versus that company. What I would encourage you to do if you're considering starting a new cell-based company is to really, really think about a completely differentiated approach. Both could it be a scale-up approach, it could be a completely new species that you're going to be targeting, it could be a absolutely wild and differentiated idea that we haven't seen before. Because what we started to see is a lot of the new companies are going to be doing or pursuing the same process that the more established companies have already, trod. And so as an investor, we're looking at a company that's starting out now that is going to be trying the same process that a super meat has already tried 3-4 years ago. And so, it's very important to understand how differentiated the approach is from the get-go and not fall in love only with the science and the discovery, but really think about what is my company going to bring to the table that the other 62 haven't looked at in this way or pursued it in this fashion.
100% agree with you there, and thank you for that, and to the panel for kind of touching on some really practical guidance for some of the listeners today who are likely entrepreneurs thinking about the company they're about to start, have already started, and looking for capital. If we can just add a bit more guidance to that, what would you want to touch on? What, for example, differentiation is clearly something that I think people should consider, along with, of course, IP. And how much money they need to raise and how long that will carry the company for as far as their runway, and then inflection points thereafter, perhaps that would justify another fundraise. Just sort of having worn the investor hat and seeing companies going through these sort of these jumps to kind of become more relevant. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with that could be like a nice nugget of information to just think about as they think about this role as an entrepreneur? And maybe Mariliis, we can start with you.
Sure. Something that I've seen in my own entrepreneurial journey and also now as an investor is really build from your heart, meaning that really build what's your truth out there and build in your own region that I mean, of course, get capital from everywhere around the world, but build for your people, for your culture. You know it in and out. You know the difficulties in your own market. You know the preferences of the people. You have such a big advantage to do it where you are and in the environment that you know. And I mean, of course, it's going to be a long journey, so make sure you have fun on the way. And for the female founders out there, you still have about a week or a few days to apply for the Vegan Women Summit. So if there's any females out there, just go. That's going to be an amazing ecosystem and an amazing place to just found fellow entrepreneurs with you. So these would be my 2 or 3 pieces of advice for the founders out there, or to be founders out there. Of course, sorry, also apply to Sustainable Food Ventures on our webpage. So of course.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariliis. I do think we're we're probably out of time here. Alex, Anita, let me know if that's the case. If not, if anyone else has anything to add, please, by all means.
I would just say that we're all here to help anyone that is kind of moving forward with a business or a concept around the cell-based space. I know KBW is very engaged. I know Stray Dog and SFW and Big Idea Ventures, we're all we collaborate with each other, we help each other, and ultimately what we're all about is making this a reality in the marketplace and supporting the best companies who have the potential to be the kind of the winners and the global companies in this space. So if you reach out to me or Lisa or Prince, Khaled, or I'm going to get it wrong again, Mariliis, I'm sure we'll all sort of collaborate and support each other and make some good decisions in terms of the companies that are kind of being invested in. I know that I often reach out to Lisa, for example, and throw companies that we want to collaborate with to her and vice versa. So, we're all in this together. God, that sounded so kind of COVID. I apologize. Jesus.
It's true though, it's true.
Awesome. Well, it's been a real privilege speaking with you all, and I know the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And as Andrew said, I think you know where to find us. We're all on LinkedIn, and you know how to get in touch with everyone here. And to the panelists, I think there are a few unanswered questions. So if you guys have a chance to check out Slack at some point today, I'm sure those who didn't have their questions answered would appreciate hearing from us. Thank you all so much for this. It's been a real honor speaking with you.